Again, thank you for coming today. We have, we went over this and now I'm totally like, nervous
You got it.
about it, so I apologize for that. We're really happy to have an interactive meeting here today. And what this is for is we have done some surveys and we've done some focus groups and we've done some interviews and we are in the sharing stage. So we're in the learning stage about this. And we have some guests from Education Elements here who are going to walk us through an interactive meeting. So it's meant to synthesize some information, and then we want you to interact with it. You see some questions over here. And we have Justin Kummer from Education Elements here. We also have Marielle Hernandez here. And we have Kristen Howell here from Education Elements, and they're going to take us through today. We have opportunities for questions, and we do have the kids out in the playground, so we're going to get it kicked right off, all right? So once again, thank you for coming, and please.
All right. Thank you all again so much for your time and being present here this afternoon. We're really excited to get a chance to be in space with you all. And as Principal Duddy was sharing, that's just in part of our listening and learning work, it's super important that we consistently find opportunities to share and be present in the community because that is really foundational to the work that we're hoping to accomplish with you all in turn. So what we have here is just briefly, you've got a large Education Elements team working with you. Chris introduced myself, Marielle, and Kristen. There's a couple of the teammates who could be present with us, but who are a specific part of this work around surveys and synthesizing data. Those are our teammates, Allie and Jake. So they can't be with you, but again, we all are really excited, just really appreciative.
And thank you for reminding me, Justin. I also wanted to introduce some very important people from our community who are here today. So Dee, our board member Dee Perry, thank you for being here.
Hey, I like that.
This is Julie Warnsdorfer, our PTA president. And I did want to introduce our superintendent of schools, Dr. Jason Valori, who is here as well. We have a lot of staff members here supporting us as well, but I don't want to take too much of your time. But I wanted to introduce our important visitors to show the emphasis that we're putting on our information today.
Exactly, and that's super important for us as well. So we are Education Elements, and we are a group of former educators who feel like they have the privilege of getting a chance to go all around the country and work with public K-12 school districts to support them to really handle a number of needs, whether we're talking about strategic planning, whether we're talking about instructional approaches and instructional coaching, or in this case, our equity strategy. This is something that's really essential to our heart, something that we're really passionate about as being former educators. So that's who we are, and we're really excited to be in space with you. We do have our emails up on this first slide right here, but we know it's a little small. But our point is we always like to make sure that we make ourselves present to answer any questions as well as you may have. So we want to have a parking lot here today. We're using that as a simple structure on each side of the room. If you do have questions, we want to make sure that you get a chance to jot those down so you don't forget them in the moment, and you can put them on the parking lot. That gives us an opportunity to go through your things that people are interested in discussing. We can then go and ideally, if we can answer those questions while we all are still here present, we'll definitely make time before we get you on out of here for any kind of Q&A. So our goal is to be present here with you all today. We appreciate you, and so please feel free to utilize that parking lot structure if there are already high-level questions that come to mind that you don't forget in the moment. But there will be time, as Chris said, this is interactive. We want to make sure that you get a chance to share with one another. You'll get opportunities to share kind of your ideas, whole group as well. So we'll work through a few different processes to get that done. So first things first is we actually do want to get a chance to let everyone check in before we dive on into our content for the day. So very simply, we're going to have you turn and talk, just like you're back in the classroom, right? We're going to have you turn and talk with an elbow partner, someone who's sitting at your table. And we just want you to check in. Let them know who you are if you don't already know them, your connection to the school, and then if you do know each other, everybody's going to let us know one thing that made you smile today. Maybe it's this cute little puppy gift behind me, or it's anything amazing you have going on in your day. So we're going to take the next 2 to 3 minutes let's get everybody connected. Turn and talk with the partner, let them know your name, your connection to the school, and one thing that made you smile. Let's go. Start to wrap up our conversation, please. I really appreciate that. Oh, your students must get as quiet as quickly as you do. This is great. Maybe not that quickly. All right. Well, we appreciate that. I want to give you all just a chance to check in, connect, and share what makes you smile. We think it's important before we dive on into the content to make sure that we all can get present and get shared in the shared space together. So just a brief overview of how we're going to go through our day. We want to make sure that we do walk away and give you a chance to actually understand kind of what our equity strategy work has looked like, kind of why, what our why is for this work, and then make sure you're aware of the phases of work that we've intentionally gone through to get to where we are today. We do want to share, want to make sure you do also have context around the data, qualitative and quantitative, like how we collected that data, and just so that you can be aware of what the data does show and what it does not show. And then ultimately, our goal here is to give you all a chance to just interact with the data, see some of the qualitative aspects around it through quotes, and then see quantitative aspects around it through different parts of the survey, like actual readout data from the survey. We want to make sure that you all have that as well. So our goal will be to give you all context on the front end, and then kind of just walk you through the 4 major insights that we have, and give you opportunities to process independently and then collectively throughout that time. Cool? All right, appreciate that. So for a brief overview, first I just want to be super clear as to like what we're doing and why we're doing it, because when engaging in any kind of equity-based work or diversity, equity, inclusion-based work, especially nowadays, it's honestly like rife with a lot of political and social issues, where in the past, just trying to become more equitable was hard enough. Now we're trying to become more equitable while not getting caught up in critical race theory issues, or ensuring that we're not guilting ourselves or our community for who we are, and actually valuing who's in this space and making sure that we're using the assets we have in our community to actually support each and every student who walks through, who comes through our schools and our classrooms. So generally, to be super, super clear, and I like to say this as a black man in doing this work as well, for us, we really do care about all students. 100% of students that are part of Laguna Beach Unified are who we want to create more equitable experiences for. And so our why is really around figuring out what supports, what structures, what environments do we need to create to ensure that 100% of students, regardless of their demographic or their background, are able to be successful. So that does not mean that if you come from what traditionally or what social media might call, you come from a place of privilege, that does not mean that you don't have troubles or academic supports that you need on a daily basis. And just because you might come from a traditionally underrepresented or marginalized background, that does not mean that you can't excel and succeed kind of in a school district's kind of traditional structures. I'm somebody who did that. So it's really important that we're super clear as we jump into this today, that our goal is to talk about supporting all students, and that's why we go through this particular work of listening and learning to as many folks in the community as possible. And so this is kind of the phase-by-phase approach that we take. So we also know that in order to bring any kind of initiative-based work to life, you don't want it to get seen as just another initiative. And so for us, it was important that we try to find artful ways to really loop what we're doing into the work that Laguna Beach Unified is already doing as well. And so that comes through a few intentional ways. Our first phase was to actually have what we call leadership learning conversations. And those are things, and we actually were at every school talking to everyone in the community, everyone who works at the schools, because you all are leaders in that way. And so we actually had foundational level conversations over the past year, just to make sure that we've been able to internally calibrate and understand that exact kind of why that I was just sharing previously. So we spent a significant amount of time making sure that folks understand that this is what we're pursuing, and helping, making space for teammates to actually help us identify the pathways we need to take to get that done. So that's really what that leadership learning phase was all about. And now we really, since around October, November, we actually started to come back into the community in person to get into our listening and learning phase of the work. And that's really because once we have our foundational conversations and are clear on where we're trying to go, it's now important that we understand, okay, now what does the community think? What do they feel? What do our students need? what do our staff members need, and then make sure that we're not bringing our own preconceived notions, whether it's our notions as outsiders or notions as leaders and educators. We want to make sure that that while we have ideas and insights that surround what supports we may need to make sure all students are successful, we want to hear from you all as well. So that's what the listening and learning part of the work has been, and we are learning that that's going to be a consistent aspect of this work as well. So while November to January was kind of the first round of this, this is an important aspect of this work as well, and we're going to continue to find ways to keep bringing our ideas or continue to listen to you as well to make sure that your ideas are present in this work. And then we move to an intentional space of strategy and design. So you see, we don't just start day one identifying, oh, this is what's wrong with Laguna, we're going to go fix it. If anything, we actually, on day one, realized a lot of the assets in Laguna, a lot of the different communities that people care about, that they really want to make sure are served in their classrooms. And so with that, we then took kind of these intentional steps, and we now believe that through some of these insights we're going to share with you all, and through some of the new insights and takeaways that you all might bring with us today, we now believe that we have what we need to start to create the right supports to meet all those needs. So that's kind of the way that we're moving through these intentional phases. And once we've got our designs in place, these new things we want to create, that's when our goal is to kind of support each individual school at building their capacity to sustain this work over time so that you all can continue to grow it in the unique way that you want to, for example, in this El Moro community.
Yeah, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the what or the how of how we did this listening and learning. Just so you know the data that you'll be looking at and where it came from, I wanted to provide a little bit of perspective around that. So we were here for a week in person in November, and we worked with principals, we worked with district leadership, and teachers to select some students to have focus groups with and interviews. So we were here on campus, we spoke to some of your amazing 4th and 5th graders. We had great conversations through those focus groups and interviews. And that happened at every school site. We spent a little longer in the high school, just given the number of students, and spent 2 days there. We also then administered a survey. So this survey only went to 5th graders. So it's important to know from the elementary perspective, when you see the survey data and you'll see, El Moro, it's just your 5th grade students who are represented in the survey data, just given sort of the complexity of the questions that were asked. It really, under 5th grade, we definitely have feedback that even 5th grade might have not understood all the questions. So we are open to that, but you'll only see the 5th grade data represented in terms of that survey. We also sent that survey out to staff and to families. So you might have participated in that survey. What we're going to talk about today, though, is just students. So this is great. So a little bit about what this data does and does not tell us. So it's not the truth, right? It's not telling us some overarching truth. This is perception. This is the student experience. In those empathy interviews, we just asked students about their day, about their experiences. We weren't asking them, probing, leading questions, and they were just sharing their experience and their perspective. Same within the survey. It's definitely not generalizable, right? Just because one student experience is X, and maybe it's a student who matches a certain demographic, and their experience is something, that doesn't mean that we can generalize that experience onto others. We did not do random sampling, right? So we cannot say scientifically that this is, again, that generalization cannot happen from the data. So it's just a lot of perspectives and experiences and talking about some trends. It's not going to tell us about root causes. So at this phase of the work, we're just sharing back some insights. We're not going to have a conversation today to get at root causes. You might have some ideas in mind, and I'm sure that'll come up in discussion, but that's not going to be really the focus of today. And again, not going to get to the answers or solutions, and you might walk away with more questions than you do with answers, and that's kind of okay with where we're at in this phase of work. And then just logistically / kind of technically here, you will be seeing what's called heat maps with the data. Some of you might be familiar to these. I think we kind of see these a lot, but I wanted to make sure I shared kind of a key with you for these heat maps. We try to keep them really simple. Basically, green is higher favorability, as we're calling it, and red is kind of a lower favorability, with gray somewhere in the middle. So with the lights off, actually the color is good, so hopefully you can see that spread there. And there's just a little bit of kind of further explanation about that. So when we say favorability, we're talking in a Likert scale of out of 5, a 4 or 5 is favorability. So that's going to be either kind of mostly true or totally true or all but most but not all for those survey questions. So that's just to give you a sense of the heat map data you're going to see. I can answer any questions as it comes up too. I just wanted to share that. Okay, I'm almost done, I promise, and then we can get into it. So a little bit about the data. So we surveyed about 1,100 stakeholders. 878 of those were students. So you'll see 91% of El Moro fifth graders, so a pretty high percentage of fifth graders participated in the survey. So that is a good number and representative of your fifth grade population. And then the focus groups, go to the next slide, Justin. There you go. We met with 73 students and staff. We met with a total of 23 elementary students and 10 total focus groups. So just to give you a sense of how many students we had those conversations with over the time we were here in person with them. All right, without further ado, Mariel.
And I have the privilege of leading you through the data review protocol. So what we're going to do today is first we're going to predict, and this will let us activate some prior knowledge, surface assumptions, and really start thinking through what this data can tell us. Next, we're going to observe. You're going to engage with the data. We'll show you a way to do that, and you'll get to use the wonderful sticky notes, pieces of paper, everything around you. And at the end, we're going to debrief, discuss the predictions, how that connects to the data, to real life, and we want to hear your takeaways. And so for the prediction part, similar to what you did earlier, you're going to do a turn and talk. If there are 3 of you, go ahead and connect. If there's a group of 4, then split off into 2. So what you're going to talk about is, what do you think the data will show, and what are you interested in learning more about? And this is a way to start framing, to start thinking, getting a warm up in. So we have 2 minutes. You can get started now. What are you thinking? And if the answer is, I don't know, or I'm not certain, that's a perfect answer. You can raise your hand. Go ahead.
Okay, I was just curious what the motivation or the catalyst for this process was.
Awesome. That's a really great question. I think that could even go in the parking lot. It's something that we can share more about. All right, one more person.
Well, I'm honestly a little confused about who you are,
Yeah.
how you come to our community, what is this new, it's kind of new. My daughter is 4th grade and I never hear about this. And I would like to have a little background in what is all this.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is good. So this will be good for the parking lot. I think there's a little bit we can say just about the journey for sure. And it has been that. And I know that for us, we are, like I said, we are educators and do a number of different things, but we've been able to partner with you all through an internal recognition that this is something that you as a district, that Laguna Beach Unified as a district wants to be more mindful of, wants to improve on in terms of helping their students be more aware of their identities in this space, but also be more aware of what's going on in the community and the world around them. And so this is something that for us, we believe in partnering with you all, and so since the initial kind of call to action to really help from your board to really help your district kind of rethink, initially it was racial equity. We then jumped in as partners to kind of learn from the community and say, when you hear equity, like what are really the challenges that come to mind in the community here? And we learned on day one that while racial equity is valuable and extremely important, there are a number of different other elements of equity within the community that we thought were really important for us to be aware of. So we're talking about what our students' needs are socially-emotionally, how we're supporting our students who come from other communities who weren't born in this area. How are we mindful of students with LGBTQ issues, where students in middle school and high school are starting to explore their identity in those ways? How are we making sure that our systems, our classroom, our schools are supportive spaces for them as well? So that was one of our first learnings and insights after beginning this work. and that's kind of opened our eyes and kind of broadened our awareness to all the different ways we can support you since then. So there was initially, again, a call to action from the board, and then when we came in as partners, we learned that yes, racial equity, but also all students means broadening our lens a little bit more to think about what equity might mean throughout a number of different signifiers and supports.
And it fits under our district goals of continuous improvement, every student every day, and meaningful relationships. So all of those things fit under this work, right? How do we reach every student and give them the best possible experience? Okay, and how do we improve as a school district, as a system to meet those student needs?
And we started working with leaders, with different people. We came together as a steering committee, and so we started working, if you're anything like me, or like timelines, in 2021, and so we wanted to really make sure that whatever work we were doing was really grounded in this community. And then the listening and learning part has been part of the fall. So we hadn't interacted with students directly, other than students who may have been in high school, really interested, or part of the board meetings already. And so this is one of the first touch points where we talk to your students directly.
Thanks.
So I was just wondering, I don't have a fifth grader, so I didn't get to see some of the questions. It's kind of hard to answer a prediction about what's going to happen and who's going to do what. I guess like maybe elementary school kids would be, I don't know what the questions are. We assume that maybe they're not as worried about things, and we get to high school, we'll be more worried about things. But the question is, how are these questions worded? Are we trying to fit a certain data? Because we all probably have seen the slides, and they seem a little extreme. So we're just wondering if maybe some of that is trying to fit that narrative, like the way that the questionnaires were worded.
Well, one guy, I really like, you had a great insight around, like, your kind of prediction. We think they're going to feel a little more favorable, and then that might shift as they get older and kind of broaden their awareness. Super high level, and those will be something that we'll kind of show in the numbers a little bit later on. Then when it comes to the questions, so there was, and I'm only going to, because I want to make sure that we can actually be present and not have questions like this slow us down. But I don't want to, if you have more questions like this, we would love us to use the parking lot so we can properly answer them and make sure we're maximizing our time together. But this is a great one. So it was also really important that we followed a super intentional process of actually putting all of these survey questions in front of leadership in a few different forms of fashion here to make sure that, and that leadership actually, district leadership was actually able to edit questions, take out questions that we thought would have been unproductive or that you actually already have data for in other surveys. So there's other metrics of data that you all are taking in to understand your school's climate and culture in those ways. And so we thought it might be redundant or unproductive to ask certain things. So anything that was put in front of Laguna Beach Unified students, Laguna Beach Unified leadership had 100% kind of power over ensuring that was going to be part of that process.
Can I mention we also had parents and staff, some parents and staff members who also reviewed the questions from representative from across the district. So there was that voice as well before we gave the questions. We can share more information on Tripod, our survey partners as well, just about sort of the validity of their survey tools in terms of where they come from and where the questions come from, just so they're not, it doesn't feel like they're random. So we're happy to share that information.
Yeah.
We can share as a follow-up a bunch of different links for you that you can kind of go deeper as well.
Yeah, and Tripod is also research-based, scientifically backed. It was created by Harvard graduates who really looked at data, and these are types of surveys that are done across the country. And so these questions have a lot of resonance for districts all over.
So where can parents go to read the survey questions that were given to the fifth graders? Is there somewhere that you can access?
Yeah, actually, if you took the survey for the parent version, it was extremely similar to the student version. So it's just a student-facing question versus a parent-facing question, so just the framing of the question, but the STEM was the same. So we can share and work with the district to share the questions out, but just know that if you did participate, that's why we wanted to push it out to parents too, so you had that opportunity to see what your students were taking. And again, there were a lot of different eyes on it to make sure there was nothing inflammatory. For the fifth graders, we took out anything really related to sexual orientation and things of that nature, just because we had conversations where that wasn't something we wanted to do at the 5th grade level versus high school, right?
I think people are wondering too lately when this was all sent out. I think that's where people are confused. Like,
Yeah.
I think a lot of, like how that survey was sent to parents, correct? Is that,
Yep.
I think that's.
That was in the timeline.
Yeah, so it's in the timeline. We worked with principals to send out information through school. Parent Square. I was gonna say school loop. Through Parent Square, and so that was, every week I think information went out. Over the month of November, December is really when the surveys went out.
We did the surveys at the beginning of December and November, when the surveys went out, 5th grade.
Yes.
Yeah, just want to make a comment. First of all, I'm super grateful that our son is in Laguna Beach, and I'm super grateful that the school is interested enough to always continue to make things better. And I think we're all very fortunate to have this great school district. And I think it's great that this process occurred, and we're trying to get better. And I'm grateful that everyone's here together in the middle of the day, revoking our schedules to be here. So thankfully, people are here to share with us, so I'm just looking forward to hearing what you guys have to say.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, really appreciate that. And again, I wasn't lying. We kept saying we appreciate you all being here. One, acknowledging that it is definitely in the middle of the day. Your students are, occupied somewhere around here, so you found something for them to be doing to be here. And we also know that, and so with that in mind, that we value your presence, and so we're doing our best to be as transparent as possible. And so we also, we're recording this to make sure those who are present can see the presentation and hear everything. We also share it anytime we utilize slides. We always share those out. So Principal Duddy has access to those, and he'll be able to share those out as a PDF for folks who, again, could not be present, but those who can be present as well. And then we always will make sure that we find a way to share the actual survey questions again with everybody so they can be mindful of that. Yeah, and so that's our whole point. If we wanted to kind of obfuscate things, we would have done this over Zoom and done it at 9 a.m., right? So our goal is to make this as kind of as open and transparent as possible. So we do appreciate the questions and definitely understand kind of the nature of concerns or the nature of your interest. And ideally, we know that not all of your questions or concerns will be answered in our presentation today. So that's one, why we definitely value your questions and we value the parking lot. Two, that's why we want to share this with you. So those questions that you have, we can ideally hear them as soon as possible to make sure that we're keeping everybody in and kind of really looped into the process. So appreciate your presence, your questions, and interests. And again, we'll do our best to be as transparent as possible. Anything that you see today, you'll be able to look at again at another point. So we're kind of asking for your first initial reactions and initial thoughts today, knowing that as you have some time to chew this over or think this through or discuss this in more detail, you may have new ideas come up that we'll definitely make space for as well. So really appreciate that. Thank you for that comment as well, and we appreciate your presence. So, and I respect that, hey, it's hard to know the data will show if I don't remember the questions. Totally understood, but I appreciate hearing some of those things that you're interested in learning more about, like kind of the timeline, like what brought us here. So that's good insight for us to make sure we're really clear on that in the future.
Great, and so as you're going through the data, we're going to share it by insight. And so you'll have these types of questions. You may see it on the left and the right side. After each insight, you'll have seen focus group data, survey data. We would love for you to think. You can write in your Post-it notes or on the pieces of paper. What are your takeaways? What are you surprised by? And what are your questions?
Beautiful. Yep, and you'll be able to utilize those throughout. You can utilize sticky notes, any kind of note taking, or you can just sit here and kind of take in the information and process with your partner or whoever's at your table accordingly. These are all optional tools for you to use. We just appreciate you being here. So we have 4 high-level insights that we're sharing that I don't think, especially for people who really know their student even as they're beginning their academic careers, these are kind of things that you may understand, you may have already predicted. That's kind of why we want to make sure you got a chance to do that. Is that at a high level, we actually have 4 insights. So number 1 is that there are actually many positive elements of Laguna Beach Unified's DEI culture. So we're excited to kind of go a little bit deeper into what we mean and what we saw there. When it comes to the classroom, we believe that we saw that relationships are an important lever for relevance. So as students feel like they have strong relationships, they felt like the classroom experience was more relevant to them, or their experience of what was going on in their lives. We were able to glean and understand a little bit more about the impact that insensitive language or behaviors has on students, or when they're occurring or how they're occurring. And then ultimately that there are a number of important initiatives that the district has taken over the last 4 or 5 years. But there may be a disconnect between how we are deploying those initiatives and how our students are actually taking them in and engaging with them. So these are kind of the 4 high-level insights, something that you may already been aware of yourself, or things that you may have had conversations with your student about. These are, so this is kind of the structure that we're going to be going through. We're going to go through 2 high-level insights at a time, and then after that second insight, we'll give you some time to kind of debrief or process independently, or you can kind of turn and talk and have a brief mini discussion about those takeaways, surprises, or questions. So we'll go through 2 insights at a time for the sake of time, and then we'll give you a little bit of time to process and debrief before we move forward to the next set of insights. So that first one, this came up, this was number 1, not because we wanted to start off positive. This was number 1 because this is like actually the most impactful takeaway that we had after talking to students and reading the survey data as well. That at the end of the day, there are, like, no matter the kind of questions that we asked, or no matter the conversation that we had, students feel welcome here. Students across demographics feel this is a great place. They're happy to be here. They appreciate their teachers. They feel connected to their schools, and they often do have peers that they feel like they've got meaningful connections with as well. And so regardless of the different ways we're trying to understand that information, and across different grade levels and demographics, we ultimately were able to have positive data around feeling included and a sense of belonging. And that is, and for you all who chose to be here, like that might be obvious to you, but that's when we talk about national data, that's not always the case. So this is actually really important, and for us stood out as being a really salient first insight, that at the end of the day, when it comes to thinking about equity and inclusion in Laguna, while there may be challenges, and a strong majority of students, staff here, feel like this is a really welcoming place to be, and we think that's important as we kind of go into what are some of our focus areas and some of the challenges. Because ultimately the foundation's here, the community is set, and people really appreciate what they have, what they're experiencing on a day-to-day. And so you might see, and so we've got a few, these are just quotes here on the screen from elementary students. So we don't have them labeled as to what grade level or what school. We just at a high level, we're just taking insights and quotes back from students at different, from students collectively, excuse me. So these are all a few quotes from students about strengths when it comes to ways they feel belonging and some of the challenges. So one thing that came up often were that the students felt like compared to other places that they've been or places that they may be coming from, if they were new here, they felt like they got welcomed to the T. They felt like people sat by them, people made sure that on day 1 that they felt like they had a connection, that they felt like they belonged. And that was something that really stood out to our students who are new, who weren't always from here, who would say, well, in my other town, in my other community, that's not how people treated people. There are also times where students who do come from different communities, there are times they might feel different. And it's actually not even because of anything that's happening in the school building, anything that the teacher's doing. They just start to recognize throughout different aspects of their experience where they're different from students. And students from different backgrounds are starting to share that sometimes is a struggle for them when they realize they're different, right? So if we think about that, there's a lot of things that your son and daughters do to make newer people feel welcome, to make them feel like this is a place that they can belong. But then there's also different times throughout their experience where people start to learn or are reminded of their differences. And it's stark to them because it's not something they feel every day, every moment.
So I just wanted to share a little bit of, this isn't one of the heat maps, but this is just one sample survey question. And so this will give you a sense kind of the survey. So the parent version might frame it from the parent perspective, but we asked students, I feel like I belong at this school. And they range from totally untrue to mostly true. And this is what you're seeing right now is a K-12 version. So this is not just Elmora's, or sorry, 5th through 12, because only 5th graders took the survey. But you'll see largely across demographics, favorability was very, very high of mostly true or totally true that they feel like they belong. So again, a really positive indicator. I think why we're here is to understand how we can make sure that anything in yellow over here of the totally untrue or mostly untrue, we can move it to blue, right? We want all students to feel like they belong. And so that's what we're focused on, even though the data is largely very, very, very positive, and again, compared to national trends, we know that it's not absolutely true for every student, and that's why we're here to make sure. But you'll see it's kind of distributed across different demographics as well. So here's one of those heat maps that I talked about, and you'll see you had the prediction back there, which is very, very true, that elementary students largely are going to respond more positively. They're happier about their experience. You know, I think there's a lot of different reasons why, but we see that in the data loud and clear that our elementary students, this green bar here, are responding more positively and have higher favorability to these questions. So hopefully you can read these questions. Are these readable from back there? Great, so it's about, you know, everyone trying to be fair, trying hard to make people feel included, feeling valued, feeling treated with respect, feeling like they belong. So these types of questions, and the average favorability, and then across the grade levels there, with high school predictably so, getting a little bit less favorable, which is, again, kind of the trend in data when you look at data across K-12, which for any of you who have high school students who have taught high school, that's probably not surprising.
Give it another second, take that in.
Yep.
And so remember, you don't have to be writing, but these are, as we're showing these next couple of slides, this is where if you have any particular takeaways or surprises or questions, feel free to jot those down. So this is insight number one. That at the end of the day, a ton of positivity around the culture, around students feel like they belong, and around the ways that we're talking about equity and inclusion in Laguna Beach Unified. So for our second insight, this is one that we are really intrigued by, and this is really thinking about what's going on in the classrooms. And so we realize that, and I think educators definitely know that as relationships, the strong relationships are, often you're able to, the better a student does, or the more supported they feel through their struggles. And we saw that in an interesting way as well when it comes to equity and inclusion, in the way that when it comes to relevance in the classroom, cultural relevance in the classroom. And so what we took away that was really interesting was that, honestly, again, because of the strong culture, students feel connected to their teachers, and they especially were able to share the different ways they know their teachers are interested in them, whether they want them to succeed. What was interesting was that the more students felt connected to their teachers, also the more they expected that teacher to create more relevant experiences for them. And so again, we're thinking about a student, a relevant experience in the classroom doesn't just mean cultural relevance, it doesn't just mean having a different main character from a different racial background. It might mean relevance to what's going on in their time. It might be relevance to what's going on in their community, or relevant to their lives. What they might mean relevant to their lives as fifth graders, 5th through 12th graders. So what was really interesting was that the stronger of the relationships, the higher the expectation a student had that they would have a relevant experience. And so that was where we actually saw some of those differences, were that they were asking for more relevance in the classroom, and it was because they feel like they have such high relationships. So oftentimes you can't get to instructional relevance, academic relevance, because relationships can be up and down. But because that part is such a strong foundation, we did see a call for more relevant and engaging classroom experiences in a number of different ways. So, for example, one thing that was really exciting for our fifth graders, for our elementary grade students, where they're thinking about how they feel when they're in different parts of their lesson or when they're in different classrooms. So they're starting to actually feel like in different classrooms, I should feel like I now am in a different discipline. And so when I'm in science, I should put my lab coat on and this is where I'm going to be. When I'm reading, I want to feel like I'm being put into that environment, that my teacher's transforming the world around me to make that world make more sense. When I'm in history, I want to be a part of it. I want to really feel what's happening in this particular time and place. And so that when they feel like that's happening, that is when they really, that was some of their favorite aspects of school, and that's when they really feel like the relationship and the relevance was really high. However, there are times where they also felt like they are discouraged to ask a lot of questions. Sometimes it might be because their teacher seems really stressed or that they really want to get through this content, but they're asking those questions because they feel like they're trying to find ways to make the experience more relevant to them. They're trying to pull the relevance from the experience there, and they don't believe that when the environment discourages that they're able to do so.
And so this is the heat map that you'll see that has the most red from anything that we looked at data-wise. So this is why this stuck out to an insight for us. Again, it doesn't mean that it's like quote unquote bad. It means that this is just the student experience as they reflected honestly in what they're learning in their classrooms. And it's an opportunity for us to learn more about. It doesn't mean we're coming with some solutions or answers. This is just an opportunity for us to dig further into this and sort of figure out what we might do to increase this feeling of relevance. So you'll see there are questions that ask about different backgrounds or places. There are questions that ask about people from different cultures, connections to problems or issues around the world, so making those connections to that relevance to what's going on in the world. And then connection to your life and your own interests. I know that might be cut off down there, but it says life and own interests down there. So you'll see across the board, the first one we did not ask elementary students, like I mentioned, anything that included sort of gender, sexuality. We did not ask the 5th grade students, so there's an NA there. And then your 5th grade students, 62%, there's kind of neutral in some of the areas with a little bit of kind of on the unfavorable side. Moving up to high school, predictably again, that increases across all of these questions. Great, so you can see a 5th grade image here. So this is looking at our Top of the World and our El Moro 5th graders together here. And this is asking one specific question about teachers connecting the things you learn in class to problems or issues around the world. So you'll see, over 50%, most but not all, and all, but we do have 31% who said none or a few. Again, across the grade levels, you'll see how that sort of has a little bit of a increase effect, with the exception of
All right, and so now after going through a couple of those different insights, we wanted to give you a moment to actually either independently reflect, if that's what you'd like to do. Hey, what am I seeing? What are some of my takeaways? What are themes? What questions do I have? Or if you'd like to discuss, you also have time to do that as well. So we'll give us the next 5 minutes to do that. So 5 minutes, we can either discuss and answer, hey, what are takeaways, ideas, questions, surprises, or you can process independently. The choice is yours.
Exactly. So for our insight number 3, this is if there's an impact of insensitive student language and behavior. So something we notice is that students may be exposed to racially or ethnically charged slurs or hurtful language, and this often happens in unsupervised spaces. So that could be bus, lunch lines, sometimes it occurs in classrooms, but it's really in those unsupervised places.
Digital.
Oh yeah, digital places as well. Again, unsupervised. And some students felt that not all teachers address these comments or take appropriate action for them. And something that students even shared is that the students that say the hurtful things may not even realize the deep impact that these hurtful things have on them. So these are some examples where these are strengths and challenges. Some kids are saying like, we love it here, everyone is nice. Teachers really care about you, whether you're having a bad day or a good day. Whereas some students say, I want adults to stop the bullying. Some students feel like there's a lot of things undercover that adults don't really know happens. And so students may see things but not feel comfortable addressing it with adults, or feel like teachers don't see it, therefore nothing will happen.
Just a couple data points. I'm coming in as like the data person, I guess, here, but just a couple data points here that we wanted to share. Again, overwhelmingly positive. And when we talked about compared to national data, we have a national data set, which again, we'll share all this after the fact, but when we look at Laguna Beach next to our national data set, without fail, on every question really, Laguna Beach is a lot more positive generally than our national data set. So when I'm comparing things nationally, that's looking at all of the survey data that we've collected from across the country. But you'll see here, this is about how often do students you know treat you with less respect than other students. And I'm showing this one by demographic, just to show the different demographics and sort of where this landed with this question here. Again, over 50% say hardly ever or never, but we do have some pockets of students indicating that they feel like other students maybe treat them with less respect fairly often or very often across those demographics. So that was just a data point that we thought was interesting to share. Again, we're sharing all these things transparently, not to say this is a huge problem or we need some solution for this, but more so to, again, share what we found. So, you know, in this stage of work, we can take it to the next, which is to think about what are some actions we might want to take to address some of this for all students. Another question here was about bullying. So you saw from those quotes, there were students that did indicate that they've been bullied or they see bullying. However, the data tells us that percentage-wise, it's very small. The students that indicated on the survey that they were bullied, right? So this is how often have students you know threatened or bullied you. Again, you'll see it across demographics. There were a couple demographics that stuck out a little bit more than others. However, every demographic is well over the 50%, with some more like 80% in the hardly ever or never.
And as a reminder, this is 5th grade students plus everyone else.
This is looking across 5th through 12th data, exactly.
And our next insight is there's a disconnect between the student experience and initiatives. So students, for example, know that no place for hate is going on. They know that there should be different parts of character, but they have a mixed levels of trust that, again, adults will address issues or provide opportunities for student input. Students really want to share what they have to say. And students share that in the middle school and high school level especially, they don't feel comfortable going to adults and that they're not sure how issues will be addressed. And students have varied identities and life experience that don't always align to some of these district and school-wide initiatives. And so here, again, strengths and challenges, students know this is a no place for hate, so they are encouraged to not be mean to each other. Some students even say, you know, I don't see anything too bad, some things happen, but, you know, I feel like I can trust the people around me, that things don't become big things, that they, even when it's small, people will go for it. And we do, at the same time, we do have some students like this one on the bottom who says, I have a strong fear of being known as a tattletale, so I have a strong reluctance to tell adults. So here, for some students, it may not be the adults that they're worried about, but their peers. They might be worried that they might get in trouble because they're telling others. And we see that students also have an understanding of SEL being a school-wide initiative, but it doesn't always connect on what it feels real for them. It is helpful, but may not give them the strategies to support themselves or others when something happens on the bus, for example.
What is SEL?
Social emotional learning.
Oh, sorry.
And again, just a question that ties to that theme here about at school, everyone tries hard to understand people from different backgrounds. So looking across, again, largely positive, a little bit more falling into that somewhat true, somewhat untrue space. Again, that kind of like neutral space with you know, varying percentages here in the totally untrue or mostly untrue. And you'll see, you know, some different demographics that are a little bit sticking out that, from others, but largely pretty similar in terms of how the split was for that question. And your last heat map of the day, this one is mostly gray, so if it looks like you can't see it, it's because most of the responses were gray here. And some of the data, you'll see the NAs for elementary school were not asked at elementary school. Again, indicative of the conversations we had prior to administering the survey to ensure that everyone felt good about the questions that were going out. So those NA responses are what, or because your elementary school did not see those questions. So those are about skin color or race, sexual orientation, or religion. Just given fifth graders kind of wherewithal, I think the thought was that they might not know those things to be true. We don't want to make assumptions about their kind of ability to recognize those things in their peers. So this started with sixth grade for those specific questions. We did ask about families who come from a different country or culture, and families who have more or less money than yours. So a socioeconomic question was asked to fifth graders.
And so now we are at the end of sharing these insights. And so what we would love for you is in your table groups, or if you're in the back, you can come together with other people. We want you to talk through what findings match your predictions or assumptions. What did you find surprising or different from what you expected? And what questions does this data leave you with? What are some areas for exploration? So we will have how much time? Is it still 10?
About 10 minutes, yeah.
We'll have 10 minutes. Yes.
I have a question about the surveys. Was any of the data broken out by gender? It doesn't look like it from what's presented today, but is that available if there's being different experiences between the girls and the boys in their academic and other school experiences?
Yeah, absolutely. The data can be broken down by every sort of dimension that we captured the data along the lines of. So gender definitely, we just showed some data points that kind of stood out in looking at the data, but we can definitely share that with you. I know the administrators all have logins to see the dashboard, so we can talk about getting you a login if you really want to interact with the data. It can be, you can do all the splicing that you want to do, to the point where sometimes you're splicing so much and you're like, where am I? But yeah, the dashboard allows for all that.
And so have you guys drawn any conclusions on any perceived differences in the survey results based on gender?
We didn't see anything when we were looking at the data. Nothing stood out gender-wise. That doesn't mean that we went in every question and broke it out by gender, right? So if there's a question you're curious about and how genders align on that, we definitely could explore that further.
Thank you.
Great question.
No problem. It's a great question.
All right, I think we're ready. 10 minutes.
One more question.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting, you didn't take into account any children with learning disabilities or physical disabilities or learning differences.
In that last
Considering,
question.
is that, what did you say?
That is a question that was asked. I believe, I can look into the data right now. When you don't have a response rate high enough, we don't want students to be identified. So in looking at the fifth grade data, I don't think that we had a fifth grade response rate high enough as students who self-identified. But I can double check on that, because that definitely was a question that we asked students.
Because if they feel comfortable learning at school or comfortable in a
Yeah.
parent group or whatever, those are important factors to consider regardless of the
Great piece, and that's exactly, and those are the kind of questions that allow us to, one, continue to parse out and go into the data more specifically now, not where we're giving kind of holistic readouts, but now when we're talking at school about school level strategy, those are things that are important. So those questions are actually really, really helpful and might target direct or more intentional reflections as we're trying to think about strategies in the next steps. Like, okay, well, what about are there certain gender differences in certain areas that are really important, like bullying, for example, which we did look at and didn't see a difference? Or what about our students with disabilities or with special needs as well? Like, what is their experience? So those are definitely things that we looked at holistically. But as we think about strategies, if those are questions or important takeaways from you, please make note of that. That would be important for us to take away ourselves.
Okay, one more question.
Yeah.
Do you think any of this data could have been skewed by the stress and anxiety of the pandemic?
Oh, I mean,
Absolutely.
but for sure. But one, we yes, and that's part of that actually came up a lot when we were talking to people actually. So we definitely know that we're sure that that's part of what's going on quantitatively as well. But we didn't directly ask any questions about that. But that's a great point.
And can I just share one part about, we have this quantitative data and we also have qualitative data. And so when it comes to gender, something that we heard both from elementary and students that were in high school was dress codes. They were like, you know, there's a difference here, and they noticed. So those are like the small kind of observations that we saw in a focus group, that in the types of questions that came out in the actual survey, that wasn't captured, but that was something that, as I'm reflecting, did come up.
Please.
Given the quantitative and qualitative data that we've all seen, and
Yes.
that obviously you guys spent a lot of time finding, what does that actually mean? Does this affect the curriculum? Does this affect, what does that mean for us?
And that is, when we were kind of going by our phases, like that exact question, what does that mean for us, is that is the next step. So what does this mean? So we've taken kind of high level insights like, hey, we understand that really when it comes to equity and inclusion, there's a lot of positivity here. So what does that mean? Does that mean we can kind of walk away and this is enough? Or, well, we also know that some of our initiatives are really connecting with our students. So what does that mean here? So that's kind of so that literally the exact question is kind of exactly the part that we'd love for you all to be thinking about what you want to see, what's important, what you're hearing from your students, or what you think would really represent this community in terms of what you would like to see, what you'd like to see done, what you think is next.
And I'll say, logistically, we move into kind of a design phase with a school level team. Each school will have a sort of design team and be continuing to bring it back to the community to think about, okay, specifically for us, when we see these trends, we see this data, what are areas that we want to focus as a school and sort of strengthen what already is working really well, so that maybe there's that narrow percentage of students who aren't feeling that. How do we make sure that we get everybody on that side of favorability? And then what are some areas we might want to tackle or try something new to address this? And I think a huge piece of it, especially when we think about the student experience, is going to be including student voice in designing whatever it is that we're going to approach. So we're not coming in with some like preconceived, now here's your prescription of what to do. It's really a community-based, and this is again one step in this journey of sharing the data. And now it's okay, what are we going to do with this data, and how are we going to start to kind of prioritize what areas we might want to address? Again, including community voice and of course the students in that process as well.
Some ideas have been affirmed that we thought that we, or by the we I mean the royal we, that we thought of early on in this work that we should be focusing on, and then some insights were actually kind of illuminated through the leadership learning sessions and the listening and learning work. We've also come to new insights. Yes, please.
Would it be possible to briefly see the phase slide?
Oh, no problem.
Mm-hmm. So we can kind of, now that we have the data and the information, we can see how you're going forward with it.
Yeah, make it kind of sense. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll say that this slide makes it feel super linear, which it's not. Like Justin alluded to, like there's constantly this listening and learning, right? You never stop listening and learning. And then, you know, it makes it feel like it's also done kind of at the end of June 2022. This is just sort of how we've scoped the year, this school year. But we were working previously with you all from January 2021. We started our work with you. And then, you know, the hope is we continue, or that these things will live and breathe and continue, even if Ed Elements isn't a formal part of it, like we'll, you know, this work continues on after this sort of formal.
Stephanie, kind of want to give you an example too, of like next steps. Like when I read this and see this with everybody, and the quote about it's a bully-free zone, but people still bully, right? It makes me like, that's my question, kind of surprised. Like everybody knows like it's the bully-free zone, right? But how do we actually get the students to operationalize that out on the playground and on the bus when I'm not standing there, or when the parents are, you know? How do we get the students to really put that into practice, and it's not just a saying, right? It's like really how do they make that connection of what their behavior is and what it means to be a bully-free zone? So that's a question that I have, and that I'm going to be researching as we move forward in this process. Okay?
Chris, I think your staff survey was part of this as well?
Yeah, there was some interviews and staff was surveyed as well.
Yep, so this is just students today. We really wanted to focus on the student voice today with you all, but that doesn't mean that we aren't also going to share the staff results and the family results as well. I think it's just kind of in our nature to always start with the student experience, because that's, you know, ultimately why we're all here. So that will happen as well. That's just where we kind of started. Yeah.
My question is on the action items. Are there any policies identified that are going to be redesigned right now by the staff, and how are the parents going to be informed informed about those changes?
I think policy is usually a long game kind
Right.
of thing, so there's nothing that I can think of that, the findings here aren't looking to me like policy, but maybe long-term there could be things that come up, but nothing like abruptly is going to change policy-wise.
I haven't identified any policies that need changed.
I think the policies is practices that we want to get
Yeah.
to.
Right.
Okay.
And I might as well, I
Yeah.
think, we'll have you take these questions, because I think that'll make it easier to actually process and think about next steps, so
Yeah.
just know that you're not interrupting anything, please.
As far as the surveys with the faculty and teachers and stuff like that, when will you be sharing that? And of these phases, when are there more meetings, or is this the only meeting? Is there a meeting in March, June?
What, please?
Yeah. So Thursday afternoon, we'll be meeting with all the school leaders. So we're going straight from here to the high school. Tomorrow we'll be at Top of the World in Thurston. We're having lunch with high school students. Tomorrow we're having lunch with Thurston students on Thursday. Thursday afternoon, we're meeting with all the principals and the school leaders, assistant principals, and some district administrators, and sort of doing a debrief and sort of parsing out, okay, what are going to be the focus areas at the district level, who are going to be the teams, how are we going to think about the teams at the school level, because every school is going to have different entry points and focus on different things based on what your specific needs are and strengths are. Some of the things happening at high school or middle school just really aren't relevant. They're important to consider because you're thinking about your trajectory of your child, but you're going to be focused on different things here. So that's happening Thursday, but then from there on, we meet every other week. As a team, we are out here once a month, so we're continuing these conversations, and we'll be, again, at the school level having those design teams who are coming in to really roll up your sleeves and start to think about what does it look like, and what are some things you can, actions that can be taken to try and see, and that's kind of this iterative design process. It's not like we slap on a solution or we come with something. Ed Elements does not come with like here's a curriculum. That's not our jobs. We facilitate a community process to help kind of you all to come up with what's going to work for your community and your students.
Did you have a question?
Yes, one more hand.
Yes, I was just curious how, how did you select the parents and the staff and the community stakeholders to participate in the earlier stages of the survey? Because until very recently when we took that one survey, I don't know if all of us were aware that we were able to be a part of the discussion.
It was sent out to everyone through Parent Square. So,
But all throughout the process.
Oh,
the beginning,
so,
when you saw the stakeholders and parents.
Yeah, so a steering committee was formed back in January as sort of a first step to bring people together. And there are a lot of people in that steering committee who kind of were actively wanting to talk about these things and wanting to come together and create sort of it's not like a governing body by any means, it's just it's a group who's been trying to helping us to inform on what the kind of experience is in Laguna, and then helping guide the work along the way. So that happened in January. From then on, it's been a big prerogative to bring more people in, and this is one big step with that. The survey was one big step, and like I said, that's going to continue to happen. We can't, unfortunately, invite everybody on the Zooms every single time, but we will continue to provide opportunities to come into this work, and at the school level, start to have it live more within your school communities as well. So it's not just kind of a district initiative, it's really living at each school.
Okay, I was just curious because from the beginning I was very interested in it and asked to be part of the diversity committee, but
Yeah.
I'm not sure kind of where it went. So I was just curious.
Well, let's definitely follow up.
Wait.
And I think it is a good opportunity to remind everybody that our Lcap survey reminder went out today to all parents. So that's another survey that we give in our community. We give it each year, and it asks a lot of your feedback, right, about the El Moro experience as a parent, or as a student, or as a staff member. And so we use that to help us in our goals and our plans for future improvements. So that's another opportunity. If you're looking for an opportunity to give feedback, that link went out today on Parent Square. It went out to all parents. And if you didn't get it, let me know, and I'll make sure to provide the link for you so you guys can give some feedback and are going.
Yes, I filled that one out. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is like a district, not, like the school, has nothing to do with PTA or, anything we send out, or, because I know all of you are very involved with PTA, And so they have nothing to do, it is all district and board, and school, totally separate.
Thanks for that clear. All right, I really appreciate this. Thank you for being willing to ask these questions, because I think that in every question I've heard, I think other people have been wondering. I've seen a lot of head nods as people have been asking these, so thank you for doing that. Yeah, now we just like to give you some time to do exactly what I think a lot of you all are already doing, is thinking about, okay, what's next? What do I want to see in El Moro? What kind of experience do I want my student to have? And so that's really what we're hoping you can do for us right now. Is either independently think about your own takeaways, like what are important understandings from this data, from this information that you have. Are there any surprises, anything that you weren't thinking about that really stood out to you that we should be mindful of? And then the last piece is continuing with those questions. You've seen how impactful questions have been for us. So if you have any additional questions, whether it's how can I be involved or tell me more about this timeline, please feel free to do that as well. All right, so now feel free to discuss amongst yourselves or kind of process independently. I appreciated being able to come in at tables and have a smaller conversation and really continue to answer your questions. We appreciate, we felt this when we looked at our survey numbers, we felt that a lot of people are just interested in these topics and want to get to talk about this stuff more. We appreciate that and we love doing that. And so we would definitely make ourselves available for you all as you continue to have questions or new ideas pop up in the future. And speaking of which, there's a couple of parking lots on the wall. We also have space for your takeaways, surprises, or questions. Anything else that you might want us to be mindful of around next steps or high-level things that you're recognizing, or further areas of exploration that you're thinking about for us to look into in the future. Really appreciate that. And with that, we just want to, again, make you all aware that in this step of transparency, like as Kristen said earlier, we're going to be going to each school, doing a similar presentation in this way. And it's just to make sure, again, as you all can see, that we're trying to give as many similar experiences or opportunities for folks to engage as possible, while knowing that we can't always meet everyone's needs or schedule or time. And so we're still going to find ways to make sure those who couldn't be here can engage in the conversation too. So feel free to connect with your peers in the parent community who couldn't be present, share those ideas with them, see if they have any questions that you could bring to Principal Duddy or us as well. So we really appreciate your time. I'll definitely get your question second. We appreciate your time this afternoon, early evening. Thank you for giving us that time. For those of you who do have to go, we're at our time, 4 o'clock. But if you have questions, we can stick by for a few minutes to answer any additional questions.
And your exit ticket is to put whatever post-its you wrote in one of the posters. That'll just help us hear more of what you're thinking.
All right. And thanks so much for your time and attention today, y'all. Take care. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.